but they were about World War I and how he slept with the horses because the horses had better sleeping arrangements than the soldiers did, and how he used those horses to bring ammunition to the front and wounded soldiers and servicemen back to be treated by the doctors. And how on one ferocious battle day, when the doctor was leaving to go treat other patients, he threw Mr. Trafton a pair of medical shears and said, "You did good today." That's what I think about when I think about World War I. When I think about World War II, I think about Mr. Parker, my neighbor, when I had children myself. And I think about Mr. Parker talking about lugging a machine gun around in the Pacific. Again, about the weather, just like Mr. Trafton, and how hot it was. And about him setting up lines of defense so that he could defend his unit with his machine gun to make sure that they came out with the lowest amount of casualties that they could. And I heard him tell stories over and over again, the same stories. But I never said, "Boy, will you shut up." I wanted to hear him say them over and over again because I knew he wasn't going to be able to share those stories forever. And I could take his stories and I could share them with people, and people could remember him. Vietnam. There's a lot of things I remember about Vietnam, but one in particular is a soldier named Danny Lynch. A man who grew up with my husband and hardly ever talked about the war. He was there for 2 tours, and he hardly ever talked about it, unless he was with a bunch of veterans. And I happen to hear just one story that I won't forget. That is how he survived the war, by not listening to an order. Now in the service, we know that's probably not a good thing to do. But Danny had his warrior experience, and the new lieutenant that was there didn't. And the lieutenant said, "We're going down that path." And Danny said, "The heck we are." The lieutenant didn't listen. Danny refused to let his soldiers follow the lieutenant down that path. The lieutenant was killed instantly. Danny's soldiers went around. That's a hard story to hear when you're an officer in the United States Army and you know it's the job of the soldiers to follow orders, but it's also the job of the soldiers to have a brain. And Danny had a brain, and he brought his unit through. When I think about Iraq and Afghanistan, I think about a lot of people, but mostly I think about my husband. And being on the phone with him one day when he had just left for the war, and hearing a 9-line medevac come over the radio, which meant that they were bringing in wounded. And him knowing that I knew what was happening as a soldier, and him saying, "I gotta go. I love you." In Afghanistan, things had changed tremendously. The communication to soldiers had changed tremendously. And that was only over a period of 3 or 4 years. But the communication with him was so different, and I know communication is very important for soldiers. And those letters that you write and you send to the soldiers and servicemen while they're over there really meant something to them. I remember him sending home a picture, and the background was filled with letters and postcards that had been sent by little first and second graders. And he really enjoyed the, "Hi, I really appreciate you. Do they feed you?" Those kind of letters are what made the soldiers' day and the service members' day, because they knew they weren't forgotten, unlike some servicemen who had that type of experience where they thought they had been forgotten. So it's really important for the veterans to have days like this, because we know we're not forgotten. In the service, that we had is not forgotten. When I think about the Women's Army Corps, obviously I think about my sister, and I think about the fact that her whole unit, when she was in basic training, was quarantined because of the measles. It's kind of hard to train when you're quarantined. I don't know how they did that. But veterans are part of society. We're affected by the weather. We're affected by disease and illness. It's not just machine guns and bullets. We are affected by our community, and that's one of the reasons why we continue to serve, and we continue to come to services like this, because it's in our memory, and it's not to be forgotten.